So, wow. Well, thank you. All right. Round 4.
Okay.
Merrily we roll along.
This is a kind of sad poem, and I will end with something more cheerful. But this has a story behind it. It's called After, and it was after my husband, my late husband, passed away, and I was speaking with a friend about how much I missed him and so on. And she said, well, you know, you can get rid of that. You can get rid of that sadness that's plaguing you. I said, how? She said, remember only the good times. Forget about the bad times. Forget about anything that makes you sad and just think about the good ones. And I thought about that, and it sounded good, but not really, because
Right.
this is a kind of selective process where you kind of eliminate this aspect and that aspect of the relationship, and you remember only some. And I couldn't do it. So anyway, After. Of all my images of you, is this or that the one to keep? The sick old man I washed and fed and diapered like a child, and eased to sleep with morphine and a kiss. Young playful father, master artisan, teacher, author of letters to the press in which your conscience spoke, unreconciled to the denial of justice. Mandolin strummer who chose me for a wife. Soldier home from the front, aged though still less than 21 and aching to begin, given this second chance at life, your life. You gave yourself to me with ring and vow. I kept all of you then. I mean to now. And I think that memories ought to be kept as they come, whole and packaged. I don't know if everybody agrees with me.
Well, I would say that when you're free to keep your memories, because sometimes you can't get away from your memories, and your mind ensures that you're separated from some memories. But to the extent that we can take life whole, if it doesn't destroy us, that's the way that it should be taken. But always with a mind that sometimes it can destroy us. But what you said about instinctively knowing that you shouldn't just take the good parts, underneath that for me is, I would say, maybe I don't really know that the bad parts were so bad and the good parts, maybe I'm not sure what was good and what was bad. Maybe I should try to take it all and give myself time to live with the good and the bad.
Now that's wisdom. That's wisdom. I hadn't thought of it that way. But there is a judgment that maybe lasts for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also, if you take out one cog from the machine, is it still going to work? Maybe not.
Right.
Depends. Is the bad memory something that was essential to the good memories? Is the event that happened, which may be painful, did that lead to something else that was, maybe life-saving in some way? Or, something that, yielded other memories that you treasure above everything?
Sure. And even more than that connection, there's a connection of action and responsibility. So when Aldous Huxley said, experience is not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. So you make the counter memory, that memory that you don't want to remember, you react to it and make the counter memory. So that they all, I think you're right, Anton. I think the gears fit together, but that's because somehow I hold on to a belief in the possibility of meaning. Mm-hmm. And I won't slip into nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing coheres. It's all rubble. So
That's
Yeah.
that's very true. Very true. Thank you for backing my instinct.
oh, your instincts don't need any help. But you're welcome.
Um, um,
Well, what do you have next for us?
you know, you mentioned the word rubble, and there's this wonderful list in Rhina's poem, obviously. I'm gonna go to a poem called Memory, which is a list poem. And I guess, you know, rubble makes me think of weeds. Another thing, you know, like something that is viewed as extraneous or maybe undesired, but it's there. You can't escape it, and maybe you shouldn't. Maybe there's a reason for it. So anyway, this is called Memory. The weeds of the soon discarded hot dogs on carts. The weeds of serendipitous manufacturing of sandals. The weeds of a routine shadow of an ancestral beach umbrella. The weeds of water. The weeds of hallucinatory trampling. We walk on them. We stamp them out with our feet, and still they reappear. Still they reappear. The weeds of your self-doubt in the pocket of an open field. The weeds of flat feet walking the angry road. The weeds of precipitation over your splattering brain. The weeds of someone else's exile. The weeds of a filibuster. The weeds of drowning again and again and becoming an army of the drowned. The weeds of rotten chickadees. The weeds of mausoleum ennui. The weeds of a disaster getting over itself. We walk on them. We stomp on them with our carnivorous shoes. And still they firework. Still they firework. The weeds of non-skangaroos. The weeds of a good place to scare yourself. The weeds of maybe not getting screwed. The weeds of exactly the most tiring clown. The weeds of a flamingo shadow over wildflowers. The weeds of beauty. The weeds of a dollar lunch. The weeds of a miserable person who makes everyone else happy. The weeds of, oh shit. The weeds of an ignorant car. The weeds of ice. The weeds of the discarded. The weeds of other planets on your finger. We stretch our legs on them. We stretch our metaphysics. And still they flay us. Still they skin us dead. The weeds of a massacre. The weeds of juxtaposition. The weeds of globalism in a carpet bag. The weeds of experience. The weeds of pigs in the weeds. The weeds of getting beat up. The weeds of Savonarola. The weeds of jouissance one rarely thinks about anymore. The weeds of WTF history. The weeds of your departure. The weeds of your son. The weeds of your integrity. The weeds of your perpetuity. The weeds of comrades. The weeds of absolute cowboys. The weeds of unspoken maggots. The weeds of us. The weeds of the transformative death. We unlove them. We unbecome them. And still they pilfer our will. Still they bring us back into music.
Music.
So many unexpected things. Wow.
That's a poem you have to read over and over.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask you a technical question, Anton. Did this go through many drafts?
Not really, no.
Was it ever shorter or longer?
No.
Then how did you know how much to put in and when to stop?
Well, it's kind of a song. There are like 4 verses and 4 choruses. I think it was the music of it. It was largely kind of a stream of consciousness. And I just sort of felt like it's the right length. I kind of came up with the refrain and then modified it slightly and then modified it some more. As I was kind of going through the other things. I don't think I wrote the refrains first or the verses first and then like put the refrains in. It was sort of like, it was almost kind of like intuiting the breadth of the poem, this is enough of a list of beats. And now, I kind of think about what's happening with them and then some more kind of response to it. So yeah, it was kind of intuitive. I mean, in terms of like, I obviously changing some of the images, some of the stuff that, some of the specifics, but it wasn't really like a heavily revised poem that like was completely different at the beginning. It was sort of like one of those things that just kind of, I kind of intuited my way into it, for better or worse. And
okay.
Was it one of those poems that sort of wrote itself?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I really admire about it is that the variety of the use of language. I mean, essentially you've got a list, but it's so profusely layered and different in the individual filaments of that list, because sometimes they're straight images, sometimes they're quite abstract concepts in a short phrase. Sometimes you make up a word. So it's beautifully various. And there's only 2 ways to me to achieve the kind of variety with a rhythmic spine, the way that you do. You either have to have a kind of intuitive sense of the shape of it, or you've got to work on it a hell of a lot. So that's why I asked my question. So thanks for telling me. Wow.
Sometimes miraculous poems like that come all by themselves, and you don't know where they came from, but you sure know enough to keep them when they're there.
Oh heavens, yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. And you try to get yourself into a place where they come more frequently.
I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that.
Clean living, that's your problem.
Shucks, I knew I was doing something wrong.
You have to think pure thoughts a little more often.
Oh, that's so boring.
Oh, this is great fun. Thank you. I'm really enjoying myself. Well, I have to go in another direction because I don't have anything like what you just did, Anton. Although, listening to it, when you said that it was like a song, I don't know if you're aware of the Jobim song, Waters of March. It's a bossa nova song, and all the lyric is a series of images. There's no attempt to make them cohere. It's a list of images, but it has a cumulative effect because your imagination fills in. So that's what you've done. Of course, is not really similar, but it had a little bit of the flavor of it for me. It made me think of that song. So then when you said you're thinking of a song, then it really made sense to me how you might feel, where you've got to come out of the weed lines and come into the stomping lines.
Right.
Yeah.
We always need our stomping lines. Yeah, I was just looking at the at the lyrics online. I can see the I mean, I think I'll really like this song. I'll listen to it after.
To listen to it. It's I don't know Brazilian, I don't know Portuguese, and I don't know Brazilian Portuguese, but there are great performances of it, and it has been translated into English, and you can hear it both ways, and it's hypnotic both ways. So great. Well, okay, I have to, as I say, go in a different direction, and this is a poem whose title is a big word, palimpsest. And a big word deserves an epigraph to explain what the big word is about. And what palimpsest is, in the epigraph, a manuscript on which the original writing has been effaced to make room for later writing, but of which traces remain. In other words, traces of the original can still be, they're slightly there, but they've been covered over much more completely and dramatically that you really can't read what's underneath. Palimpsest. Music of the Florentine Trecento, late 14th century polyphony, scored for voices, fiddle, lute, recorders, and a clavicimbalum. The pieces first written in the hand of the composer, but lost thereafter for 500 years. The texts and the notation carefully scraped off to save the precious parchment for a ledger to record church properties. Its secrets slept in the illegible, well lost, until the new millennium brought forth multispectral imaging. Its incantations spoke in scans and filters, woke the seeming dead, commanded it regain the page and take its place again in time. I press a button and the sound leaps at me, shaped by specialists who take their cues from newly printed manuscripts to body out the notes and give them life. And as I listen to the plaintive call of age-old tribute to forgotten love, I wonder if my own millennium will ever turn, and if I'll get the means, by magic old or new, to summon back what I, the careful scribe, relentlessly effaced from skin of memory. The song I wrote in heart's ink copiously, when life provided melody and rhythm once, before I scratched it out and overwrote it with the blank numbers of the daily ledger.
It's philosophical.
Well, I dig metaphor, so this is.
Do you think there's a kind of poetry that has traded its real gift for ledger?
Oh boy. Yeah, I do, but I don't want to start naming names or they'll come after me. But I think I can confide in you two that, yeah, I do believe that. Just as, I mean, there's a daily ledger in not just in poems, but in music and art and everything else.
Yeah.
All human expression. When the creators lose touch with the source of the creative force and kid themselves that they're doing something that they're not, then that's what you get.
I agree. And I think it happens also when they lose contact with the potential reader, the stranger who is going to find you, even if he never sees you alive at all. But somebody will find you. Somebody's mind and heart will let you in. And I think we have to keep that in mind, that we are communicating. That communication is part of what we do. It's not all self conversation or self-analysis.
Well,
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Anton.
you know, this is not a devil's advocate thing, but it's like it's important to kind of truly communicate. I think, just to add to what Rhina is saying, true communication is different from like basically imagining a reader and kind of trying to second guess what they're expecting, and then essentially kind of repeating yourself. Maybe you were successful. Like it's easier to do that if you're maybe not a poet, but somebody that can be wildly commercially successful. If you have like a hit song or maybe a novel extremely successful, and then you just write 5 novels that are the same
Certainly.
thing, character doing exactly the same kind of thing, because this is what people want. And like your rationale is that this is what people want, this is what I'm known for, so I have to just like keep feeding them more of that. And very soon it can become not genuine communication, but just almost like an ersatz, like an imitation of what you used to do. And it's
here's what I see is happening there is these people think that they're considering their audience and they're trying to know their audience. But to me, communication rests not on knowledge, but on belief. You've got to believe that there will be an audience that will be open to what you're doing, that will complete that connection. But you don't have to know them, but you do have to believe. And we're living in an age where faith is profoundly challenged everywhere we look. And so it's not surprising that kind of faith in an audience is also imperiled.
Yes, right. You have to remember the other fellow, even if you don't know him.
Yeah, and you got to believe that, because once you lose your faith that the other fellow is connected to you potentially enough to understand what you're trying to do, once you lose that faith, then language becomes useless.
Useless. Exactly, right.
In a way, it's almost like maybe, life or one's artistic work has to be a kind of palimpsest where you layer new things, and they, like in your poem, it's not necessarily like you're not just like scribbling over the same thing again and again and again and again, like reinforcing existing lines. But as you go through life, maybe you have new layers that are different, so it becomes a whole. It's progression.
Well, and in this poem, the sense is that the speaker has gone back and tried to scrape away something that was so painful to him that he didn't want to look at it. And what he wrote there instead is something that's safer and more comfortable. But he understands that, and he longs for the moment when he can retrieve it, because he knows that that's where the deepest meaning of his experience lies. So,
yeah, in a way that dovetails with what we were talking about Rhina's poem, about the different memories, and you don't want to excise the bad memories.
Right. Yeah. In fact, sometimes you may long to, if you have excised them, you may long to be, because to not be in touch with them is to no longer be in touch with an important part of yourself.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm glad we've touched on these topics, because there's so much, there's such a strong capturing of negative human emotions and behavior in some of the poems that we needed to address it, I think. So, all right, well, now last round.
Last round, okay. I love this kind of round because nobody loses, everybody wins.
Yes. Yes, it's not a zero sum.
No. I started with my parents, and I'm going to end with my parents because they have been a strong influence on me all my life. This is called Remembering My Parents, Remembering Books They Read Together. They were not college people. They did not have that kind of education, but they read and read and read. It was incurable in them. And they always had conversations with each other about whatever it was they were reading. Even if it was something translated from another language, they would say, well, but why did he do that? I don't understand. It wasn't part of his character. And they would talk about these people as if they really existed. And it added so much to my appreciation of books and the characters in them and the motives for writing and so on. So remembering my parents, remembering books they read together. Imagine this, a railroad flat, 3 flights up half-lit stairs above a midtown street where decades past, my parents spend their nights playing 78s in August heat or dominoes with some post-dinner guest, or, best of all, memories chosen scene, speaking of books they love, maybe Beau Geste or Don Quixote, War and Peace. Between them, details spin, imaginary places or places real enough they'll never see, illuminate their young remembered faces with light enough to light the page for me. So poor, so much endured as man and wife, but blessed by this one bond that held for life.
You were fortunate. What a beautiful thing to have. Wow.
Yeah.
My parents did not read literature. They read the papers. They read, books about business and history, but they did not read literature. They certainly didn't read poetry. So I found those things on my own. It's wonderful, Rhina, to hear how really basic a part of your childhood and your upbringing, the love of these things was. Yeah. Whether your parents reading or what was the other one that you read?
Well, my grandmother's melopeias, what my grandmother did with music and language together.
Exactly. I mean, these are given to you right away. I mean, for some of us, we came to our love of them a little bit later because they weren't given to us right away and we had to find them. And the love is not any different, but I envy you your early start.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really did. I had a happy childhood in that sense that there was so much that they gave me that was not tangible. It was not toys.
Well, those toys would be broken by now, and these things aren't.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. That's very true. Yes.
So, wow. Well, the last, what's your last word for us, Anton?
Yeah, my last word is a 3-legged stool. No, that's just 3 words.
You put in a hyphen, it might be 2.
So that's a Russian joke. Everyone knows that the last word is the one that you remember. It's just like at the end of end of a TV program. Everyone knows that the last word is the word that you remember. Today, the word is stool.
Really?
There was some, there were like some comedy shows.
You can see why I asked him if he was going to behave himself.
I'm just, I'm incapable of it. But no.
Bless you for it.
And my father is going to yell at me for, if he ever sees this recording, like he kind of makes fun of me for constantly reminding people that when I was like from 2 weeks old to, however old, he would like whisper like Arseny Tarkovsky poems and Pasternak poems, Zabolotsky, just like some, a lot of like surrealist poetry, futurist poetry. When I was like, instead of lullabies, I was like getting fed all this
Wow.
futurist surrealism into my psyche. That explains kind of everything.
It does.
Wow.
But I really remember, I really relate to, the Don Quixote, War and Peace, because, I am also kind of blessed because my parents, like both of them, were extremely encouraging of kind of writing and, music, all sorts of things. So, they always kind of wanted to have some kind of creative outlets, and maybe, it's hard not to make a self-deprecatory joke and say, oh, and that screwed me up for life and whatever. But at the same time, I do feel very much like there's so much that is a blessing about kind of being aware of those things and being aware of literature and,
Oh, yes.
having that part of your sort of mind be active. But I'm going to end with a poem that is actually, it's inspired by something that actually was, I think, told secondhand to me by my mother, talking about a story that my grandfather talked about. I don't think he ever told me directly. She told me a couple of times about it. And this is sort of, the addressee in this poem is the grandfather. Some details are slightly changed, but ultimately it is kind of the spirit of the poem, and a lot of the kind of the essence of it is actually based on a true story. It's called The Informant.
Mhm.
The man in the vest adjusted his hair. His eyes were electric blue. You knew who he was and why he was there. Sadly, no one else knew. Then Boris came out with his Trotsky quip. Said Trotsky wasn't that bad. You noticed the blue-eyed man bite his lip. Nothing more would need to be said. You watched it unfold for the rest of the night, the way Boris kept getting lit, the charm he turned on, his teammates' delight at his escapist wit. The next morning, you knew not to look for him. His room was empty and clean. The hotel had checked in no one by that name. He was never heard from again. It's been decades. Your children are teaching school. Last December, the curtain fell. Some teammates of yours fell to alcohol. You're retired, still in decent health. You think of Boris, that talking dead on that night of pickles and vodka, and the shadow of Azrael over his head, in the shape of a blue-eyed informant. Was he sent to the gulag, or was he shot in the head right there in the yard? You will never switch off this thought. You will never get a fresh start. There are bullet holes in the back of the bus and behind the old kindergarten. There is blood in the benches where fathers drink kvass and ex-convicts make concept art. You walk these streets every single day. You drive your Jeep among ghosts. You've grown accustomed to it. It's okay. Nothing revealed, nothing lost. Only sometimes at home you let out a sigh. Your granddaughter looks up at you. You notice her look, raise an eyebrow, smile. Her eyes are electric blue.
Mm. That's a great poem. I know that one.
Thank you.
Oh boy,
Yeah,
that's for sure.
yes, indeed. Yes. And even though citizens of the United States don't quite understand that situation, those of us who've lived in a dictatorship do. We understand it. We know it. There are informants.
Yeah. I mean, my grandfather was he was a coach, like a team manager of track and field team for the Olympics, and he traveled with them all over the place. There was always someone called a minder, like a person that was there to kind of keep tabs on, people did defect, and people
Sure.
did just kind of disappear from the team sometimes, and then my grandfather would get in trouble, of course, for letting it happen. I mean, yeah, sometimes, but it's of course the poem maybe makes things sound darker than they are. I mean, really, he kind of lost sight. He doesn't know what happened to that person. There was someone that made kind of basically said, Trotsky, maybe not that bad. And then, kind of, who knows what happened to him? And there's every chance, of course, that he wasn't literally, executed for it, although we just kind of don't know. And there's always that fear. There's always that kind of lingering, well, it's unlikely, but maybe. It has happened.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Things like that have happened.
People don't disappear because they want to.
Exactly.
Well, again, because this has been given to you, it's important that you send it along to the rest of us. Even though, as Rhina says, Americans don't have, we don't have the tools to understand it as others do. Sometimes just to be confronted with the face of something so incomprehensible and different, it's important for those of us who can't understand to understand that we can't understand.
Yeah. That's right. Yes.
I didn't think about that as something that you two had in common when I thought it would make for a terrific pairing. But wow.
Yes.
Has that poem been published? Is it in a book?
Not
Which
in the
mine?
book. No,
Oh, that one.
It has been
Yes.
published individually, but yeah.
Yes, in the book. That's one of your best.
Yeah.
That is one of your best.
Yeah. It's in the Wow anthology. It just it's not in one of the collections.
Oh, good. Well, then I have it then. That's great. I mean, it was familiar, but I didn't know that I'd read it. I thought maybe I'd heard it, but wow.
Yeah, it was in the New Criterion, and then it was republished in the Cafe Review, and yeah, it's actually in 3 places somehow. But no.
Well, it deserves to be in more than 3. So.
Well, eventually, I have a manuscript of I have a collection that's not published yet. It's part of it. I'm still working on it to some extent.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
I have all these projects, all these kind of plans, and half finished manuscripts, or a third finished manuscripts, or 3/4 finished manuscripts. Eventually, something will become actually 100% finished, or just see the light of day and it's unfinished.
Anton, I'm going to tell you a secret. I have known right from day one that the future is going to hear from you. I have never doubted it.
Yeah, so complete one of those projects. We await it.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, because I can, I am going to do my level best to embarrass Rhina.
Oh dear.
But I kid. But it is true that the last poem of the program is one that I wrote. It's called During a Blackout, and I did write it during the blackout. And I did write it after reading one of Rhina's books by candlelight during the blackout. So first of all, when I had the blackout, I thought, what am I going to do? I'll light a candle, and then I should read something. I'll read Rhina's book. So there you go.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I felt so honored. So grateful.
I knew it would make me feel better, and it did. So during a blackout, and the epigraph is simply on reading Rhina Espaillat's Agua de dos Rios. When strong winds jolt the voltage from my house, I lose the power of pushing back the night. Throughout my neighborhood, the dark is deep. I sit and read your book by candlelight. The sudden stillness settling around me seems to extend out to the endless stars, as though with giant arms, a universal player embraces me, a lone guitar. And while this fragile light, which as I breathe trembles at my presence, sheds a glow of blue and gold, your words are melody, whose harmony I realize I know. Segovia's Recuerdos de la Alhambra is pungent as the memories evoked when you write of your childhood in that world of which no one I know has ever spoken. So how could I remember? Yet your words conjure untasted flavors, unseen hues. In this shy light and this caressing quiet, the night is using me to play your music.
How beautiful that is. Thank you so much. That's the reader everybody wants.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm only as good as my inspiration, so of course this had to come out well.
Well, I'll tell you what, another thing that I love about poetry is that it's a long conversation. There's no end to it. It started with the first poet, who must have been somewhere way back there with the first man or woman. And it's a long chain, and it's still gathering links.
Yep. Yep.
Yep, that's right.
Well, I enjoy your company immensely, both of you. And I think the combination has been singularly of high quality and good community. So thank you very, very much. Wow.
Thank you for making this possible.
Yeah, thank you.
My part in it was actually very easy. I had to wait until you two became as great as you are. I couldn't do it 1 minute before.
Listen, I want you to know that most of us are jealous of you because you have something that the rest of us want. And I'll tell you what it is. That's music. And I think music is the art that everybody wants to have. I know that poets think like musicians, and we would love to be musicians. Unfortunately, I can't even read music, but I adore it. And if I could trade poetry for music, I would do it.
Well, here's how I see it. It's as though there's a house with different rooms, and they're lit. And the room with music in it is lit and has these wonderful things in it. And the room of poetry is lit and has these wonderful things in it. And, you know, when you're in one room, you wish you were in the other one. But the point is, the light is the same.
That's true.
Oh, interesting.
That's true.
So you've got what you want, you already have, just a little differently.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's true. And you know, those two arts were born together anyhow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, if you're working with rhythmically, whether it's metrically or not, but rhythmically, So, you know, your weeds poem is rhythmic.
Oh, it is.
I didn't scan it. It may not be metric, but it's rhythmic. So that's why I felt the musical underpinnings of it. And it made sense to me when you said it was a song, because there really are. And, you know, where poetry gets away from rhythm, then it gets away from music. So.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to substitute something else then to give it the same kind of delight that music makes.
Is it painting? Could it be like the imagery? Maybe if the music isn't there, like, can you fascinate the reader with just like startling visuals that they cannot help but linger on?
That's right. That's certainly a good substitute. And of course, the idea is to understand how to do all of those tricks, because they're tricks of the trade. And if you learn to use them all, you're in business, and you have a finger in every art then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's looking over the fence as I do, because I do work in these two areas, and then I write plays too, which is a whole, that's another thing. When you learn one thing, then you know it. Then when you learn two or three things, then you see how they're different. But when you get past that, you start seeing how it's all the same again.
Yeah, right. That's right. It's what you said. Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah. So, and then when you,
aren't we lucky?
I'm sorry.
Aren't we lucky?
Oh, well, I won't argue with that. I feel lucky.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, I know I'm lucky. It's not just a feeling.
It's interesting that you say about the light, the light in the room. I mean, sometimes I feel a similar kind of like commonality of light, like in different languages, because I frequently, I used to write in Russian. I don't write in Russian anymore, but I did, and I read Russian poetry. And sometimes I found myself like I would read some amazing Russian poems in Russian, and I'd be like in the mood to write something kind of under the, that light that you told me, kind of like the inspiration. And, I'll end up writing in English, and yet it's going to be the same kind of inspiration. It's like, oh, somehow it just comes out in English, but it's still the same energy that I got from those poems in another language.
Yeah,
that's
the same. The energy is the same.
Yep. So, and yet I know what you mean. It's like I look at visual artists and I envy what they can do. Mm-hmm. But you paint with words. We paint with words, or I paint with notes when I'm writing music. So it's all how you think of yourself. And if we can dwell on the powers that we have, which are considerable and unique, then we don't waste a lot of time worrying about what we don't have.
Right. We shouldn't anyway. Right. Well, I know what I've got. I've got good friends, and they're smart, and they write beautiful stuff. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I am honored in your company, and this is just great fun. So we will say goodbye for now, and carry on with what you're doing. Don't may all of us finish whatever we're working on soon.
Amen. Amen. And then start something else.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
Good night,
guys.
Farewell.
Bye-bye. Love you both.